Okay. I think we're rolling.
Go ahead.
Hello, everybody out there in Northern. Listen up. We've got a very, very exciting performance coming up. I'm Holly George Warren, and my longtime pal, who I used to know and carouse with back in the East Village of New York City back in the 1990s, up to no good, learning the B ways, is going to be beguiling you, amusing you, entertaining you tonight. It's going to be the likes of which you have never seen or heard before. This guy keeps very busy. He's written at least 5 books, maybe more, including one of my favorites, which recounts his adventures hitchhiking to the legendary 1982 Beat Conference in Boulder at the Naropa Institute, the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. And he is going to blow your mind. Brian Hassett!
I love it. Thank you, Holly. All right, so here we are back in Lowell. Oh, and by the way, for my prankster friends, this is a little ode to Wavy. All right, so here's the ode to Lowell and LCK, which actually brought Gayleen here for the first time when she did her poem this afternoon, which, wow, what a bunch of great poets and prose artists and theater and musicians for 3 hours today. Wow. And so I wrote this thing inspired by all of This Inspires, and blessedly, Gayleen found this in Quebec, and she was wondering, should I come to this Lowell Celebrates Kerouac thing? And she read this, and she told me yesterday it changed her life. So here's this ode to Lowell. In the spirit of Jack, a spontaneous love ode just flowed to that thing we do in Lowell. And what's cool about LCK is everybody's here for Jack, but all on our own terms. Everybody has a completely different relationship with their family member. You'll hear 100 different stories, all by people beaming in front of you, not on your phone, real life. Radiating energy, coming from, Sweden and England and California and Vancouver and New Mexico and Nevada and Colorado and Indiana and Minnesota and Missouri and Ohio and Manitoba and Ontario and Quebec and Virginia and PA and New York and New Jersey and all over New England because of On the Road or Maggie Cassidy or Dr. Sachs, because of America or Walt Whitman or Dr. Thompson, because of Wanderlust or Adventure or a doctoral thesis. There's all the guided firsthand tours you want to ride, and historians and scholars next to you wherever you roam, and playful people off the clock just riffing in the beauty of all the assembled happiness. There's non-stop jamming and goofing and hugging interaction. And there's a million places to go, both on maps and not. Dr. Sachs's woods, the Merrimack banks, the cobblestone streets, and the brick building labyrinths. And all the local Lowell Jacksters come out from all their local hidings for the weekend when they can let their freak flag fly. And everybody's got stories. And you hear Jack lines you've read played back in your head as you walk with a crew of your new best friends, from one scene to another, in places you've only imagined, and some you haven't even. And it goes on for days and days, from the setting sunlit Worthen afternoon of Thursday, leading into the epic bar crawl of Jack's Joints, and climaxes at ye old Worthen House, with David Amram riff and Pull My Daisy, until homeboy Bill Walsh's final walking tour on Monday through the secret lairs of Pawtucketville, which weaves back into our old Worthen clubhouse, where the worthy who made it all the way hoist and toast until the jam is done. It's Jack in the now, not in books, not online, in person, in front of you, right now. Live it or lose it.
Send me an email. I'll send you all the information.
Oh, right. So this whole thing, it's Jack's 100th, right?
Yeah.
And so we started this in March for his birthday. And so arc of celebrations here in Lowell for however many months. And I was down here for that in March and wrote a piece about it. And so here was sort of the climax of the birthday weekend. Of course, the night appropriately climaxed with rock and roll in a bar full of crazies going crazy at a joint called Warp and Weft, named for the looming process that was the foundation of Lowell's early economy, featuring local hero Willie Loco Alexander, who wrote one of the first songs to name check Jack back in 1975. Simply called Kerouac. And here he was weaving into the night his avant-garde songwriting magic, with just him on keys and a sax player. You don't have to hear a duet with that combo. And the other positive was it wasn't a full, overwhelming rock band blowing off the ears of all these quiet literary types. And the stage was in front of the front sidewalk windows, and it's a double-wide establishment that goes way back, so there's tons of room for everybody from the bus tour, the Dennis Hawley talk, the Anne Scarlett reading, and every other beatnik ne'er-do-well who pilgrimaged to Lowell for St. Jack's Centennial. We all arrived at a party in full swing. Brother Cliff Whalen, our unofficial LCK bouncer, was sitting at his post just inside the door, keeping out the local riffraff. Cliff's a former wrestler, and I don't mean the TV kind, I mean the Keezy kind. And he's still got the body to show for it. And with all the little toothpick poets in our coterie, it's a blessing we got one guy who can referee any disputes without them being disputed. And all the hard parts were over, concentrating on poetic imagery, absorbing erudite biographers' insights, soaking in the local tour guides' rich details. And suddenly it was the all-star encore jam, and everybody was wailing. There's Holly and the two promoter organizers, Chris Porter and Sylvia Kuna, jamming plans for the future. And there's the two pranksters, Dan Bacon and Thomas Krautz, at a table with a pile of Jack bobbleheads between them, plotting future magic. And there's documentarian Mike Downey working the room, soaking in stories like any good storyteller does. And there's the new Kerouac art designer, Shay Cotellis, internalizing the chaotic spirit to later manifest in her art. Oh, and there's Jim Dunn holding court at the end of a table with an enwrapped audience he's conversationally conducting. And there's the voice of Lowell, Mike Flynn, beaming away in person after years of us jamming on the radio. And there's Ann Waldman, who shows up even later than we did. Imagine just to have a good time without attracting a scene. And there's Joshua Tarquinio, who looks so young but is furiously recording astute observations in the nicest hardcover rope notebook I've ever seen. Woo. And there's Professor Brett Sigurdsson doing his never-ending research with his never-ending smile and curiosity. I finally ear to ear catching up on everything that's happened since she got officially tapped as the official biographer. There's Jim Sampas getting some quality time with Ann Waldman as he knows to get to know those who may be next to go. And there's Willie Alexander improvising lyrics in the spirit of Jack, all while having the author's favorite instrument accompany him. There's fireworks, calliopes, and clowns. There's the guy who's been buzzed since this afternoon and thinks he's now good enough looking to take off his shirt. And there's the middle-aged former babe who starts shedding her clothes in a last-minute bid for companionship. This was a Jack night, all right. Benevolent hustling, kind chaos, intellectual pursuits and inspirational cahoots, saxophones wailing over bar stool sailing, riffs through the mind to grooves one of a kind, tipping back jams with the local hams, slipping out for a smoke with the packin' folk. and soaking in tales that'll later be wailed. We did it right in good old Lowell. Jack wasn't there in body, but he was in soul. His spirit was in every twinkle and glance, and nobody left the dance without 100 years of his blood dyeing our own with colors for real, not fade away. Like I think everybody in this room like wished they were at Woodstock in '69. I have called this the Woodstock of Jack. I'm sure a lot of performers here probably wished they played at Woodstock. And we've all heard the stories of waiting. There was, okay, you're on at 5. All right, it's going to be 6. So you're, taking your medications accordingly. And like this is the first time I've ever had a show where and I was joking tomorrow night. I'm closing the thing tomorrow night with the Jack on Film show. I was like, oh, I've got the Jimi Hendrix slot closing Sunday night. Well, he was on at 8 a.m. I hope. I hope that doesn't happen. Okay. Oh, and here's this new idea I just came up with. So I did this. And then when I do something from a new book,
cool.
I can sort of put that one out there. So where are we going next? Oh, Hitchhikers. Okay, so there's that, you see? I know, that's kind of like, now he's doing this one. All right. So where are we going with Hitch? Oh, yeah. Right. The Thomas Galasso. It's been so neat. So I guess those of you who didn't know him, you've got to know him through, I think there's been 2 or 3 tributes to him this weekend already. Is that one of his books? Oh, it is his book. Oh, beautiful. Way to go. Fantastic.
And I mentioned it up
Yes, I remember. There's been like I say, 2 or 3 tributes to him. And he was a good friend of mine as well. And our commonality was, that started it was, we were both good friends with Edie Parker-Kerouac. And he actually lived with her. And so that was kind of a starter thing. Anyway, I have not written a thing about Tom, but because he was so close to Edie and lived with her, and also because I'm digging the yin presence, the women in this room, there's women at this festival, the women performers, and the women that, as Jerry Cimino was focusing on today in his talk. Women were a much bigger part of the Beat generation than is generally kind of Wikipedia accepted. And I know there is definitely a change in that mindset. And Edie there would not be a Beat generation if there wasn't for Edie Kerouac or Edie Parker. And she never dropped the Kerouac name. God bless her, she shouldn't have. So anyway, I knew her pretty well. So I wrote a tribute to her. And I want to do, I've never done that live, I don't think. So I want to do this tribute to Edie as a tribute to Tom, who lived with her and was the reason that it was kind of her that caused him to go down all these paths that caused us to meet. So here is a riff on a little smidge of coffee, just to keep the chi channeling. So here's some beautiful stuff about Edie. If you didn't know her, man, what a woman she was. So Jack's first wife, Edie Parker, was the one I could talk to back then, and in fact would grow to become pretty close friends with shortly after Boulder. She even enlisted me to write her autobiography with her, which seemed like the opportunity of a lifetime. I was like 23 or something, until I learned she'd already scratched out 1,000 pages and wasn't even up to where she met Jack. She was absolutely insistent that every detail of every moment of her life be included. And even at my young age, with this huge opportunity before me, I knew this would be an impossible task, and we'd end up fighting over every detailed description of every piece of clothing she ever wore. So I didn't end up joining her on that journey, and we stayed friends instead. Where Jan Kerouac and Carolyn Cassidy were shy and quiet, Edie was a ball of fire, always talking, often to more than one person at once, telling stories and relishing the spotlight. Where Jan didn't want to go in front of a microphone, Edie would eat them up, like the 6 sauerkraut hot dogs she ate the first time she met Jack, the story of which she probably told 60,000 times over that week. She was a hoot, a bona fide character, a real pisser, as they called people back in her day, a dynamite broad, a catalytic woman, gregarious, a natural chatterbox, a female Neil, in her confidence and making the party jump wherever she went. This gathering in Boulder was the first time Edie had ever appeared anywhere to talk about Jack. But then that was the case for a lot of these people, this being the first major summit at all. But she knew Jack before anyone else who was here, having met him when they were both teenagers in 1939 and fallen in love not long after. In fact, she had this whole thing she called the 40s gang, which was just her, Alan, Burroughs, and Hunky, the core 4 who predated everybody. Neil, Carolyn, Holmes, Corso, Ferlinghetti, they all came years of youth later. And you remember who your oldest friends are, who came first, who dates back the furthest. And same with Edie, acutely aware of who the original group was. And she made a point of connecting with each of them, but especially with Hunk, who, for whatever reason, she seemed to dig the most. But then he'd be my pick too. So this is crucial. First came Edie, who introduced her brainy boyfriend, Jack, to this cool guy from her Columbia art class, Lucian Carr, who in turn introduced Jack to his life-altering partners in crime, Allen Ginsberg and Bill Burroughs, making it pretty easy to peg the Beat Generation's inception to Edie's introduction and the all-night drinking, talking, and phonograph playing sessions they danced across the universe in the 4 rooms of the Morningside Heights apartment that she shared with Lucian's girlfriend, and then later with Joan Vollmer Adams. As much as Jack and the Beats were products and practitioners of the male-centric world of the 1940s and 50s, it was almost comically common for the women to be the real catalysts of creation. It was Jack's mother who gave her grown-up son the love and shelter and stability to write and preserve his manuscripts. It was his last wife, Stella, who mothered him after Mamere had a stroke and was keeping his filing cabinets and archives intact until they both passed away. It was Ann Charters who was the first scholar to take him seriously while he was still alive, showing up on his doorstep in 1966 to begin the work that would become his first biography. It was his second wife, Joan Haverty, who had the job that paid the rent on the apartment at 454 West 20th Street that gave Jack the space to write his career-changing scroll of On the Road in that 20-day shot in 1951. It was Carolyn who first moved to San Francisco in 1947, long before Ferlinghetti or any of them. And that's why Neil went there, followed by Jack and Alan and the domino tumble of history. And it was one wild, fun-loving woman named Frankie Edie Parker from Grosse Pointe, Michigan, who chose to room with a like-spirited woman who would soon become Mrs. Burroughs, just as she would be Mrs. Jack, and together hosted the rented Eden from which the entire generation spawned.
Wow.
And that's the truth. And by the way, that whole adventure in that book, Hitchhiker's Guide to Jack Kerouac, about the 1982 Boulder Super Summit, was also attended by Riva's father, Douglas, and the grandfather of that Douglas over there. and which was that thing that Alan put together, and God bless that guy, man. He did it all. That that's why I hitchhiked from Vancouver, BC to Boulder for that, and it changed my life, and I got to meet all these people. Well, Riva's dad drove from South Dakota and filmed all these interviews with everybody, and which are all in this amazing documentary. So she has got that. That documentary has been in the works for 40 years, and it has never been released until she did it last week. So
He did show it as a film.
yes, he did screen it
Yes,
a couple of
it
times.
came here to Lowell, but then people were like, give me a copy. And then
It never got distributed. It never got pressed into a DVD. And people have been asking for it for the 20 years since it was here, and now you can finally get it. And just an FYI about that. The funny story, which next year maybe we're going to do a show together and talk about the origins of this film. But she was telling me that she never took a family vacation in her life that wasn't to a Jack site. And Dad would come up with, okay, guess where we're going this year? We're going to go to the Washington Cascade Mountains. Won't that be fun?
yeah, that floating resort at Ross Lake.
Oh, you're going to.
Very exciting as a teenager when you get there and there's no food and you realize this is while my father's hiking up there.
So, but the great thing is,
There's two of the Canadian fishermen who can see his cabin from where we used to fish on Ross Lake.
where's it going with that thing? But this is the incredible thing about this documentary, and if you haven't seen it yet, get a copy, because there's, we've all seen all the documentaries that are out there, but nothing, none of them visit all the sites like this does. Like, we've all been reading about Jack dying in that St. Petersburg hospital forever. I've never seen a picture of that hospital. It's in he's got footage. He travels everywhere with this 16mm camera. So not only does he go to all these places, but he's hauling around this whole 16mm camera, and it's got footage of everything, every place Jack ever was, just about. So that's kind of the joy of that book. And it was also birthed in Boulder, 82, where that book was birthed. So there's some cool stuff there. All right, so next, ding, ding, ding. I wanted to do like one thing from each of these different books, right? And this is fun. So actually it was like the last time I was on the road, and the last time I had a haircut was for the Democratic primary in 2020. So I came here and spent those 10 days, in kind of Jackland. I was staying in Nashua, right, home of his grandparents and everything. And I was in his whole general world. Well, it wasn't until Steve Eddington took me on a tour of Nashua, but I never really felt Jack's spirit until the end of the last night before voting on Tuesday. So it's Monday night. Bernie Sanders held this final rally in a hockey arena, and walking, and the following happened after walking outside. And so you'll know, those of you who know Jack's text, I didn't make it overt, but I just sort of wove in some of his lines to give you the idea that Jack was in the space at this moment. Then the most extraordinary thing happened when it was over. Is that thousands of kids streamed out of the arena. Right next to it was a big outdoor skating pond. And in the joy of the frozen midnight moment in New Hampshire, students began climbing over the fence and figure skating on it without skates. Here were the children of the euphoric night. Inspired by a politician to dance the light fandango, waving blue Bernie signs as their batons, and running and sliding and cheering and laughing and pirouetting in moonlight and celebrating their first brush with democracy. Bernie's Rockstar Rally had flashed me back to Gary Hart in '84. But this was taking me all the way back to my childhood in Winnipeg and going for skates in the early darkness of winter nights on a pond full of happy people in a tranquil town, reveling in the simple pleasures of frozen water. Snowbanks surrounded the ice, and everyone's breath was visible in the cold and misty night. And cheeks were turning rosy, and strangers were hugging strangers in the land where they let the children hug. Democracy had played out for the last week in New Hampshire, and now voters were out playing in the last hours before tomorrow's voting. I'm the guy, as you may have noticed already this weekend, I'm the guy who always spots a cool assemblage of friends and wrangles everybody together to get a group photo. But I didn't know anyone here, and everyone was spread out all over the ice. It was like early social distancing. Then the next amazing thing happened. You know those sprawling group photos taken at center ice when an NHL team wins the Stanley Cup? And you know who Wayne Gretzky is, right? Did you know he invented those? True story. It was when he won his last cup with the Oilers in 1988 at a game in their Edmonton home arena, their fourth in 5 years. And the players had skated euphorically around the rink, hoisting the cup above their adrenaline heads. And Captain Gretzky grabbed it back and suddenly started waving all the players to center ice to take a group shot with the authentic sweat and victory joy still fresh on all their faces. First, it was just the core players, but more and more trainers and coaches and scouts and managers and all the people who made the team work came running out from the benches and sliding into the group. Well, that very scene played out on this frozen pond with this team celebrating the Sanders Cup on home ice. First, about a dozen friends gathered for a group shot, and I ran over in the role of photographer to capture their collective joy, including because there wasn't a single member of the press present. I was it. And as I snapped their hooting faces, more people saw what was happening and came shooshing across the ice and sliding into them in this crazy cartoon of calamity. I had to keep backing up to get their ever-expanding team in the frame. And then more and more student photographers with phones joined my press pool. And all that was missing was a big silver cup in the middle. So, in America, when the sun goes down, from first catching Deval Patrick in a small, dark basement room in a library, the New Hampshire primary built to a massive open-air love-in of screaming, laughing joy. This was democracy in action, in real time in America. From old folks gathering in a gym on a Tuesday afternoon to hear Joe Biden, the thousands of college kids filling an arena, spontaneously creating their own escapades of ice-capades. Participation in the political process is healthy and thriving. It's not any one group or one voice, but a collective of choirs singing songs of joy and progress, of innocence and experience, and forever going further.
Fantastic, Brian.
Good job, Brian.
Well done. Carry on.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Yes.
Love that last line further.
Amazing.
Cheers, thank you. Nice to hear.
Yeah.
What was I gonna do next?
Take a breath.
Action.
Take a drink of
Right. Yes, have some of my Canadian coffee. Right. I've done a version of this here before with Amram downstairs. Oh, and I got a great piece that's kind of like this that I'm going to do. Is it tomorrow? Jesus.
Sunday.
Like 1:30 in the afternoon. But it's I'm going to do the auction piece, which people love because I was there in the room when the On the Road scroll was bought. And not only was I there, but in keeping with something that I kind of picked up on from the Pranksters and the Grateful Dead was, and Jack and Neil did this too, was recording conversations, recording stuff. And this was back in the day when it was cassettes on a little thing about the size of a pack of cigarettes.
Yep.
And I carried these things everywhere. That's how I got a lot of the stuff in the Boulder 82 book, because I was, and it was because when I read about Kesey and the gang, like they were always recording stuff and filming stuff. And so I was like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. So I did this. So I recorded the auction. So I have an actual tape of how this all went down that day. And it was wild and none of us knew what was going to happen. So here is a little bit of that. So when you go to one of these huge auctions, the bidding increment, I didn't know any of this. I'd never been at an auction in my life. And I'm at this one. The bidding increments are all predetermined. Okay, so like over $1,000, if you bid, it's $100 more. So you can't just pick an amount. So over $5,000, it starts to go up $500 with each bid. Over $10,000, it goes up $1,000 each time. Over $1 million, it goes up in $100,000 increments. When it hits $2 million, it starts to go up in $200,000 steps. But by then, it's starting to get out of my league. Up above the auctioneer is an electronic board that lists the number, the lot number, and then the current bid in US dollars. And then below that are lines with each country's equivalent monetary value. So as the auctioneer is zipping up the numerical ladder, all the foreign currency values are flipping by like the train track changing signs at Penn Station. Euros, UK francs, UK pounds, French francs, Swiss francs, Deutschmarks, yen, lira, and the good old Canadian dollar just squeaking in on the bottom line. We exist. In fact, in a general sense, there really was one of those we exist feelings in the room. It was the magic zing of the old Jack ring. So the auction's going by lickety-split. Bought $249, a copy of Ulysses, signed by Joyce himself, and get this, Matisse, who I always remember for saying, work cures everything. I love that quote. Okay, I'll open the bidding at 5,000, 55, 6,000. And 20 seconds later, sold for 13,000 to paddle number 319 in the fourth row. It all happens like less than a minute. The big ones take maybe a minute and a half or something, but lots of stuff is going for under 10 grand, all sorts of little things, no idea what they are. But I kind of felt like bidding just because they're so cheap. It had to be something cool, right? I don't know, some Emerson thing or something. But there's this catch. You see, you can't like scratch your nose or anything, or move your arm or something, because you might be bidding. And then of course your nose would get itchy, and so you'd have to kind of turn away from the auctioneer and like a teacher at school or something and sneak a scratch. So you're watching your moves, watching the crowd, watching these people, watching their catalogs and marking in scores and bidding up to a certain point on lots. And then when their last item of the day is gone, they immediately get up and leave. Professional buyers, people with money. A set of Oxford dictionaries goes for $850,000. And I bet they're used. An autographed copy of To Kill a Mockingbird for $18,000. And I keep wondering, who are these people? Then the guy sitting next to Doug Brinkley gets up and steps out for a minute at about lot 10. He's gangster, 40s hipster, I don't know. It's a big white tie and a big black shirt, and his hair is greased straight back, almost like a football player, but like with a cufflink Four Seasons polish and rock and roll swagger. By the time we got to lot 300, there was only 4 gunslingers left on the sideline phone lines. As the auctioneer is still rattling through numbers like he's unloading on Bonnie and Clyde's car, rat-a-tat-tatting by the thousands, 9,000, 10,000. My whole life's worth flashing by in split seconds for some piece of autographed paper. Holy zippers. 15,000, 24,000, 45,000. Fair warning at 45,000. Sold for $45,000. An Edith Wharton letter goes for 800. Bargain. Must have been a crummy letter.
Yeah.
Went for a walk. Love Edith. I dig the gaslight finger snapping. Then comes the finale. Lot number 307, the lot a lot of you have been waiting for. A little auctioneer's humor. Jack Kerouac's original typescript scroll of On the Road, shown here before you on the screens. I'll start the bidding at $650,000 on this. I'm out. 650,000, 700,000, 750,000, 800,000, 850,000, 900,000, $950,000, $1 million over here, $1 million in the front row, $1,100,000, $1,200,000, $1,300,000, $1,400,000 over the phone, and then quickly $1,500,000. And all the time, it's Brinkley's buddy who's flashing up his white paddle, number 479, as soon as anyone else bids anything. The old instant paddle flash routine. Then, after a pause, the front row finally bids again. 1,600,000. Then quick, 1,700,000. Oh my God, Jesus. Then 1,800,000. Boom, 1,900,000. Yeah, this is not a little pause. It's totally silent in the room, of course. You can hear a dream pop. We can wait a little bit. The animated auctioneer allowed. 1,900,000. The bid is 1,900,000 with the gentleman. 1,900,000. Anyone say 2 million? He looks down at the front row and says, "No, I'm sorry, 2 million's next." 1,900,000. 1,900,000 then in the third row at 1,900,000. Is there any further advance at 1,900,000? Fair warning at 1,900,000, and he raises his little wooden gavel stub, says the auctioneer, articulating the air of the collective moment. 2,200,000, 2,000,002, at 2,000,002 in the third row. Are we all done at 2,000,002? Sold at $2,200,000, and the whole room explodes. And just as the applause is dying down, as it just did, the auctioneer steps up again and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to announce that this is a new world record for a literary manuscript at auction."
Wow.
They say here, there's another round of cheering and whooping. You guys got the script. And then as soon as the final clapping dies down, some guy yells, "Corso lives!" So there's that.
There you go.
Okay, and now this is in a way a collaboration because the great Holly George Warren, who introduced me, I thought she just edited this book. She came up with the whole freaking idea for the Rolling Stone Book of the Beats and put that whole bad together. And this is on just about every top 10 best beat books of all time. There's nary a one that doesn't have this book on it. So, and blessedly, she invited me to participate in her literary party.
Ryan, it's the one thing that got me back to work after having my son Jack.
Right, yes, right. That's
It's
a
the one
great,
thing that motivated me to go back to work.
yes. And I believe you told me that it was the most like joyous, fulfilling book you ever worked on in all the time at Rolling Stone
Yeah,
Press.
40 something books.
Right on. So because we knew each other and we're kind of jamming in the same circles and all, she said, Brian, whatever you want to write about, you'll have some good idea. And one of the things that I wanted to always explore was what's going on right now in this room and at this festival, which is the power of the collective. And it's so much more important when you can get with other people and work together, and it just lifts all the boats. And so I wanted to kind of explore that and get it into print and sort of stress it for people that it's about working together, man, and how that empowers all of us. And the Beat Generation wouldn't freaking exist if it wasn't for a collective of them. If they were just individual cats in 50 different states, forget it. So, okay. So here's a greatly abridged version for performance purposes. So, a little more coffee. Give me your befuddled masses, your rejection slips, pink slips, verbal slips, all. Knock down the gates, throw open the bars. The artists are having a ball. Teach me, show me, let me in. Challenge me, push me, help me win. Athletes have their team, and suits can wear the firm, but making art keeps you home alone, and LCK is the place you turn. Solo suffering totally blows, so into the sea you dive, searching for souls who swim like you and act at least vaguely alive. With deep sea whales you plunge the depths, and with freshwater poets you school. With coral reefers you spark the sea, drinking in dreams from the pool. Out of the one grow many, and out of the many grows the one, the the it, the aha, the unspoken thing. And from this desire for oneness, togetherness, the artists, from the Beat poets to the Lilith songwriters, have collaborated, cajoled, and consoled each other into movements and generations. The Beat generation may never have had a single unified voice any more than Generation X does, but their range of harmonies ended up blending into a pretty inspiring choir. And in this supportive spirit, a loosely defined Beat community became a very interdisciplinary affair, as they freely mingled and collaborated with abstract expressionist painters, jazz musicians, living theater actors, playwrights, photographers, cartoonists, dancers, mystics, and poets from other New York schools. In smoking Greenwich Village joints, like the Cedar Tavern, the San Remo, the Artist Club, something more than ideas were being exchanged. We were sharing the holy light, says composer David Amram, Kerouac's principal musical collaborator and the jazz laureate of the generation. The Artist Club was a beautiful get-together run by artists for artists, while talking philosophy, arguments, and discussions by the hour by serious and brilliant people. And then afterwards, we'd all go over to the Cedar Tavern and continue the rap. It was like a floating university. Nowhere is this more visually animated than in the 1959 film Pull My Daisy, see also tomorrow night's show, the single most illuminating Beat collaboration. Narrated by Kerouac's best 28 minutes on tape, captured in early cinema verite by evocative still photographer Robert Frank, playfully scored by the classically trained Amram, who also appears as the bop and French hornist Mes McGillicuddy, and starring Allen Ginsberg, Gregory Corso, and Peter Orlovsky. This Lower East Side home movie is the only existing footage of the Beats in their prime, other than a few scattered TV clips. Co-produced by painter Alfred Leslie and shot in his canvas-filled loft, featuring painter Larry Rivers in the role of Neil Cassidy, who was sadly imprisoned in San Quentin at the time, with art dealer Richard Bellamy as the bishop antagonist, and financed by Wall Street libertine painter Walter Gutman. It's a film made by painters about poets, narrated by a novelist. And this same blessing of community has been felt by artists ranging from the high Renaissance in Florence to the also fairly high poetry Renaissance in San Francisco. Most of the groundbreaking geniuses of Florence, circa 1500, belonged to some regimented guild or patron stable. So many of the artists like Michelangelo, Leonardo, or Filippo Lippi, along with the architects and storytellers and poets, would gather in their own mock confraternities. So dig this as the 1500 artists in Florence. In one of the more wacky images in art history, picture several of these blazing masters meeting as they did as the Company of the Cauldron for lively drunken dinners around a giant cooking pot in one of their sculptor studios. And they begin creating murals, not with paint, but with chicken legs and sausages and cheese and jelly. Even though their quarrels were nearly as colorful as their art, never has a generation of artists advanced their media so quickly. I'd like to introduce you to my friend David. That has never gotten a laugh, and I always thought it would. Like 20 years, like David, you know, Michelangelo is David. It's fallen flat for 20 years. And I was thinking, maybe this time somehow, if in San Francisco in the 1950s, a community of poets began a similarly inspired coffee house collective, meeting and reading in the nooks and bookstores of North Beach, embracing the Platonic adage, to good men's parties, good men flock unasked.
Whoa.
It's a good one. Symposium. The cultural outlaws from around the nation who gathered in this traditionally liberal port city were starting to notice the same faces on the same stages night after night. Poets like Gary Snyder, Michael McClure, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Robert Duncan, Kenneth Patchen and Resroth, assemblage artists like Bruce Conner and Wallace Berman, and filmmakers like Kenneth Anger and Harry Smith, all began enthusiastic crossover interdisciplinary collectives, and were breaking society's bird-brained habit of pigeonholing artists. A lush flower garden had burst into bloom, and it wasn't long before the psychedelic Paisley ran wild. In a sun shower of day-glow paint, Ken Kesey and his merry pranksters had a great notion to take the collective to an even higher level. Incubating in pools of acid on the edge of Stanford University, Kesey was forming an ever-expanding coterie of authors and intellectuals that would eventually encompass Neil Cassidy, the Grateful Dead, and Cherry Kool-Aid. As intrepid traveler Ken Babbs put it, the pranksters are a collective of that American spirit that's been passed on from the founding fathers through Melville, Transcendentalism, Whitman, Faulkner, the Beats, and zoom into the pranksters, where it took a wild turn of spontaneity in tribal dance, uninhibited jazz, nonsensical word raps, and any other unfettered reaching of the spirit towards newfound freedoms.
Whoa.
Ken Babbs in the house. And a healthy dose of this prankster ethic came from the pranksterish Dadaists, who were trying to overthrow not only the rigidity of the fine arts in the 1910s and 20s, but civilization itself by staging pranks in public spaces like cathedrals in the middle of a service. This gang of offbeat artists and authors had a collective effect on history rather than simply getting arrested as solo psychos. Work together. And that's the great thing. As much as these cool collectives were happening in the recent past, many are thriving today. From communal artist hearths like New Yorican Poets Cafe, which I wrote this 20-something years ago when the New Yorican was happening, and I saw it's still happening, and there's shows going on this past, so I was like, great, these things are surviving. Like the New Yorican Poets Cafe, the Knitting Factory, to attention setting, getting rock fests like Lilith Fair and the Tibetan Freedom Concerts. Groups of like-minded people are still working together for the collective better. It's good for the soul, for one thing. Cheryl Crow told me about joining the Lilith tour. I mean, it's what religion's based on. That commune, the community, the solace, and the fellowship of people who have a kindred spirit. Whether it's painting the walls with dinner in Florence or breakfast in bed for 400,000 at Woodstock, coming together stretches the horizon beyond the sum of its parts. And you don't have to be 500,000 strong. As George Harrison put it of his much smaller group, that was the good thing about being four together. Not like Elvis, I always felt sorry for him later because he was on his own. He had his guys with him, but they were only one Elvis. And nobody else knew what he felt like. But for us, we all shared the experience. Being together counts, even a collective of two. Supporting someone who is supporting you is the seed of a generation.
Wow.
So there it is. That's the fun part. There it is. So the power of the collective. You got it. All right. So this now is the end of the show. I had these all great little tributes to all these different people like Garcia and Neil and everything. I was like, I never wrote an ode to Jack. So here's my little 2-minute poetic ode to Jack. I think I'm good there, Julian. My barista.
Good man.
Jack fights back from off the beaten track, still alive at 100, as if any of us ever wondered if that would happen. After his track star sprint through the pages of history, seeing around corners like Neil at the wheel, knocking over grammar cops, blowing past the door stops to hidden, darkened jazz joints, puffing on a mez joint, never missing the point of dancing with the mad ones and singing with the sad ones and drinking with the bad ones and skipping past the madhouse and steering clear the jailhouse, heading for his mom's house to write another epic, soaring while he's manic, catching all the magic of the mysteries dark and vast. He channeled spirits till the last. He hitched the roads, had a blast. He wrote it down really fast. And now it's 50 since he passed. So let's hoist the flag up our mast and salute the work he amassed. Have you ever seen a cannon so vast? So let us all take a moment to thank the Pollard for the books, the young Prometheans for the camaraderie, the Columbia Cabal for the new vision, Neil Cassidy for The Letter, Bill Canastra for The Paper, Joan Haverty for The Apartment, Malcolm Cowley for The Championing, Gilbert Milstein for The Reviewing, David Amram for The Playing, Allen Ginsberg for The Everything, Lowell for The Celebrating, you for The Being, we for The Seeing, the glowing light of the golden eternity. Thank you, Jack, for all you shone. Thank you all. Let's keep having one hell of a weekend.
Oh, that was great. What a. Yeah.
Hey, glad you caught it. Thanks for coming. Great. Thanks for coming.
Sort of, huh?
It's good to see you, Jason.
Yes, keep on rolling.
So now you know. Oh, is he still rolling? Okay. This has been live from Lowell, 2022, October 8th. Tomorrow's Sean Lennon's birthday. And we're now off to catch Lord Buckley at Zorba's in 2022. And Lowell celebrates Kerouac. Love to everybody out there in internet land.
Should we stop it now?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what you're doing with your computer, but.
Oh, good. Electrified. That's a good word. Great.
Big pens,
Right, I know. So I'm so glad you stuck around. I know you had to stick around for 2.5 hours. Oh, no, thanks.